Our objective today is we will be able to find the value of 6 strict functions of an angle using the UC, meaning the unit circle. So you should have out your unit circle with these notes. From the unit circle, we have the ordered pair x comma y. That's your square root of 3 over 2 comma 1/2, or your square root of 2 over 2 comma square root of 2 over 2, or your 1/2 comma square root of 3 over 2, or your 1, 0, or your 0, 1, or etc., going all the way around the unit circle. That's the ordered pairs I'm talking about. What that really is cosine comma sine. So today we're going to find the values for all the 6 strict functions. That's sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. For sine, you just take the y. For cosine, you take the x. For tangent, you do sine over cosine. For cosecant, it's 1 divided by sine, which really means flip sine. The 1 divided by means absolutely nothing other than flip sine. For secant, it's 1 over cosine, which really means flip cosine. For cotangent, it's cosine divided by sine. Again, the 1 divided by whatever just means flip the whatever. So flip sine and flip cosine. Okay? Convert radians to degrees. If the angle is not on the unit circle, add or subtract 360 until you find the angle. Alright, so our first example, 3 pi over 4. Converted to degrees, that's 135 degrees. Remember, to convert to degrees, you multiply by 180 in the calculator. So 3 over 4 times 180 is 135 degrees. 135 is on the unit circle. 135 degrees is in fact on the unit circle right here. So it's the ordered pair negative square root of 2 over 2 and positive square root of 2 over 2. Remember, the first one is cosine, the second one is sine. Alright, to find the 6 trig functions, first one we're looking for is sine, which we have right here. We don't need to calculate anything. It's the square root of 2 over 2. Cosine, same thing. We don't need to calculate anything. It's negative square root of 2 over 2. To find tangent is sine over cosine. So the square root of 2 over 2 divided by negative square root of 2 over 2. If you recognize you have the same number in the numerator and the same number in the denominator, whenever you divide a number by itself, it's always 1. We have one of the numbers is negative, so in this case, my answer will be negative 1. So my tangent is negative 1. For cosecant is 1 over sine, and all in the world that means is flip sine. So my sine is the square root of 2 over 2. When you flip it, you get 2 divided by the square root of 2. Can I leave a root in the denominator? No. So multiply by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, which gives you 2 square root 2 divided by 2. And you have a 2 in the numerator and a 2 in the denominator. They reduce out, so you're just left with the square root of 2. That's your cosecant. For secant, it's 1 over cosine, but all that means is flip cosine. Your cosine is negative square root of 2 over 2. But isn't that the same thing we just did over here, only negative? So again, I'll show the math, but if you recognize it's the same thing, you don't have to do all the math. Just recognize it's negative and put a negative in front of the square root of 2. Cotangent is cosine divided by sine. So negative square root 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2. And again, we have the same number in the numerator that we have in the denominator. It's just one of them is negative. So my answer is negative 1. Alright, next example. Negative pi over 6. Negative 1 over 6 times 180 in the calculator is negative 30. That is not on the unit circle. So add 360, and that gives you 330. That is on the unit circle. That has an ordered pair of square root of 3 over 2 and negative 1/2. Okay, first number is cosine, second number is sine. So my sine is negative 1/2. My cosine is the square root of 3 over 2. To find tangent, it's sine over cosine. So negative 1/2 divided by the square root of 3 over 2. Now, we're dividing fractions. No big deal. When you divide fractions, what you really do is leave the top number the same, change division to multiplication, and flip the bottom number. So it's negative 1/2 times 2 over the square root of 3. Here, I've got the same number in the numerator that I do in the denominator, so they reduce out to 1. So I'm left with negative 1 over the square root of 3. Again, I don't want a root in the denominator, So multiply by square root of 3 over the square root of 3, which gives me negative square root of 3 over 3. And that's my tangent. All right? Cosecant is 1 over sine, which really means flip sine. So I'm going to take my sine of negative 1/2. I'm going to flip it to 2 over negative 1. And 2 divided by negative 1 is just negative 2. So my cosecant is negative 2. For secant, I just flip cosine. So I have square root of 3 over 2. And when I flip it, that's 2 over the square root of 3. But I don't want to leave a root in the denominator, so multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, which gives me 2 square root 3 over 3. And that's my secant. Cotangent is cosine divided by sine. So square root of 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2. We're dividing fractions, but again, that just means change to multiplication and flip the denominator. So square root of 3 over 2 times negative 2 over 1. Again, my 2's are going to reduce out, so I'm left with negative square root of 3 over 1, which is just negative square root of 3. Next example, 510 degrees. That is not on the unit circle, so I'm going to subtract 360. That gives me 150. That is on the unit circle. That has an ordered pair of negative square root of 3 over 2 and positive 1/2. That's cosine. Second one is sine. So my sine is 1/2. My cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. My tangent is sine divided by cosine. So 1/2 divided by negative square root of 3 over 2 is 1/2 times negative 2 over the square root of 3. My 2's reduce out. Leaves me with negative 1 over the square root of 3. Multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 gives me negative square root of 3 over 3. And that's my tangent. My cosecant is 1 over sine, which means flip sine. So I take 1 over 2, I flip it, I get 2 over 1, which is just 2. So my cosecant is 2. My secant means flip cosine. So I have negative square root of 3 over 2. When I flip it, I get negative 2 over the square root of 3. Multiply by root 3 over root 3. So I get negative 2 root 3 over 3. And for cotangent, it's cosine divided by sine. So negative square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2, which means negative square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. My 2's reduce out, so I get negative square root of 3 over 1, which is just negative square root of 3. All right, negative 3 pi. Multiply negative 3 times 180, gives you negative 540. Add 360, gives you negative 180. Add 360 again, gives you positive 180. Positive 180 is on the unit circle. It happens to have the ordered pair of negative 1, 0. The first number is cosine, the second number is sine. So my sine is 0, my cosine is negative 1. Tangent is sine over cosine, so that would be 0 divided by negative 1, which would be 0. So my tangent is 0. Cosecant is 1 over sine, which means you flip sine. So flip sine, that means you flip 0. Remember, 0 is over 1. This is 0 over 1. So when you flip it, you get 1 over 0. But 1 over 0 happens to be undefined. So my cosecant is undefined. For secant, you flip cosine. So we're going to flip negative 1. That's negative 1 over 1. So when I flip it, I get 1 over negative 1. And when you do the division, 1 divided by negative 1, you get negative 1. And my cotangent is cosine divided by sine. So negative 1 divided by 0, which is undefined.